By day 3, I already knew something was not right. Not worse, just off. And if you have ever dealt with bloating, you know exactly what I mean. It is not pain. It is not sickness. It is just that uncomfortable feeling that sits there and refuses to go away. You eat a normal meal and suddenly you feel heavy, slower, distracted, like your body is working against you. So I decided to test something simple. For 7 days, I was going to fix my bloating. Not with extreme diets, not with complicated plans, just small, realistic changes, the kind most people overlook. And I paid attention to one thing, how my body responded day by day. Because if something actually works, you should feel it. Now, before I started, I had one honest thought. If bloating is this common, why does it feel so random? Why does it show up even when you think you are eating fine? And why does it feel like no one really has a clear answer? That is what I wanted to figure out. So I kept everything else the same. Same routine, same general lifestyle. The only difference was how I approached my meals and my habits around them. Day 1 felt normal. Almost too normal. I expected at least something noticeable, but nothing really changed. And that is exactly where most people give up. Because when you try something new and do not feel anything immediately, it is easy to assume it is not working. But real change does not usually feel dramatic at the start. It feels quiet, subtle, almost easy to ignore. Day 2 was similar. Still no major difference. But something small started to stand out. I began noticing how fast I usually eat. Not in a I am in a rush kind of way. Just automatic, like I was not fully paying attention. I would finish meals quickly and move on. And for the first time, I slowed that down. Not perfectly, just enough to notice the difference. That alone felt strange, because it made me realize how often I eat without really being present, and that matters more than it seems. Because when you rush meals, your body does not always get the signal that you are done. So you keep eating, or you feel off afterward. That was the first small shift. Not in my body yet, but in my awareness. By the time day 3 came around, things changed. This was the point where I expected everything to start feeling better. But instead it felt different. Not worse, but not better either. Just unsettled. And this is where most people panic, because when something does not improve quickly, it feels like something is wrong. But I decided to stay consistent. No overcorrecting, no drastic changes. Just sticking to the plan. Eating a bit slower, drinking more water, keeping meals simple, balanced and regular, and letting my body adjust. That is when I realized something important. Fixing bloating is not about reacting. It is about observing. Because your body does not always respond instantly. Sometimes it needs time to adjust to what you are doing. And if you keep changing things too quickly, you never give it that chance. By the end of day 3, I started noticing patterns. Not big ones, but enough to make me pay attention. Certain meals felt heavier than others. Certain habits made me feel slightly more uncomfortable. And for the first time, I was not just guessing. I was actually noticing. That shift alone made the experiment feel different, because instead of trying random fixes, I was starting to understand what was actually happening. And then came day 4. This was the turning point. Not because something dramatic happened overnight, but because everything started to make sense. My body felt lighter, not empty, not restricted, just more comfortable, less pressure, less of that constant awareness of my stomach. And the biggest difference, I was not thinking about it all the time. That alone was a huge change, because when something stops bothering you, you realize how much attention it was taking before, and that is when it clicked. This was not about removing foods or following strict rules. It was about how I was eating and how consistent I was with it. That realization changed everything, because it made the process feel simple, not easy, but manageable, something you can actually repeat. And once something feels repeatable, that is when it starts to work. By this point, I also noticed something else. My energy felt more stable. Not higher, just more even. Less of those moments where you feel slightly off after eating, less distraction, more clarity, and it all tied back to the same thing: consistency, not perfection. Just doing the basics properly over and over again, and letting your body respond. That is what most people miss. They look for something dramatic, something extreme, something that promises instant results. But in reality, it is usually the simple things done consistently that make the biggest difference. By day 4, I could feel that difference starting. Not in a flashy way, but in a way that made me trust the process, which made me curious about what the next few days would reveal. Because if things were already shifting, what would happen by day 7? That's where things started to get even more interesting. By day 5, something changed in a way I didn't expect. I stopped thinking about bloating. Not completely, but enough to notice the difference. And that's when you realize it was affecting you more than you thought. Because when something is constantly there, even in the background, it drains your focus. It changes how you feel throughout the day. But when it starts to fade even slightly, everything feels easier. That's what day 5 felt like. Easier. Meals didn't feel like something I had to manage carefully anymore. They just worked better. And I wasn't second-guessing everything I ate. That alone made a huge difference. Because most of the time, bloating creates uncertainty. You don't know what caused it, so you start questioning everything. Was it the food? Was it the timing? Was it something else entirely? And that constant guessing gets exhausting. But now, things felt more predictable. Not perfect, but more controlled. And that's what actually matters. By day 6, the pattern became clear. It wasn't about avoiding specific foods completely. It was about how I approached my meals overall. The speed, the balance, the consistency. Those 3 things made more impact than anything else. Because when you rush, your body struggles to keep up. When meals are unbalanced, things feel off afterward. And when everything is inconsistent, your body never gets a rhythm. That was the real issue. Not one specific food. Not one single mistake. Just a pattern that wasn't working. And once that pattern started to change, everything else followed. By now, I also noticed something interesting. My body felt more stable, not lighter in a dramatic way, but more comfortable. Less tension, less pressure, and most importantly, less distraction. Because bloating isn't just physical. It affects how you think, how you focus, how you move through your day. And when that distraction goes away, you notice it immediately. That's what made this experiment feel real. Not because of some dramatic transformation, but because of how practical the changes were. By day 7, I wasn't looking for anything extreme. I just wanted clarity. Did this actually work? And the answer is yes. But not in the way most people expect. It didn't feel like a sudden breakthrough. It felt like control, like things were finally making sense. Meals felt more comfortable, my body felt more predictable, and I wasn't constantly thinking about discomfort anymore. That's a bigger win than most people realize. Because the goal isn't to feel perfect all the time, it's to feel normal again. And for a lot of people, that's what they're really looking for. Now, here's the part I didn't expect. Fixing bloating wasn't about doing more. It was about removing the things that were quietly working against me, rushing meals, ignoring how my body was responding, being inconsistent with simple habits. That's what was causing the problem. Not something complicated, not something hidden. Just small things repeated every day. And once those started to change, everything else followed. That's what made this so interesting, because it proves something important. You don't always need a new diet. You don't always need a complex plan. Sometimes you just need to do the basics properly. Slow down, pay attention, stay consistent, and give your body time to respond. That's it. Simple, but effective. And that's why most people overlook it. Because it doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't feel like a quick fix. But it works. And once you experience that for yourself, you stop chasing extremes. You stop looking for shortcuts. You start focusing on what actually makes a difference. That's the real shift. So if you're dealing with bloating and trying to fix it, don't overcomplicate it. Don't rush the process, and don't expect everything to change overnight. Because real change doesn't happen that way. It builds, slowly, consistently, until one day you realize something feels different, and that difference is enough to keep going. For me, that moment started around day 4, but it only worked because I stayed consistent long enough to get there, and that's the part most people miss. They never reach the turning point because they quit before it happens. Now I'm curious about something else. If small changes like this can fix something as frustrating as bloating, what happens when you apply the same approach to something bigger? Something people struggle with every day but don't fully understand yet. That's exactly what I'm testing next. Thanks for watching.